Part 15. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 141. Explosions shook the canyon. The twists and turns of the cliff reflected the roar, stirring back and forth and spreading far away. But Greet couldn't hear these movements in the cabin. The only thing he could feel was a deafening bang. Boom. There was a loud bang. Behind Gretel, the barbarian's arm holding the steel shield suddenly tightened. Gretel was also pressed forward and felt a tightness in his chest. Bernard used the thrust to fly forward, and a huge wave of air hit him, almost pushing the powerful warrior more than 2 meters tall into the air. Tisk, 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 fortunately, I'm well prepared. Greet secretly rejoiced. If he was careless and just put up a shield for himself, or simply let Bernard pull him away, he might be vomiting blood now, right? He hung on Bernard's back and rushed out of the cabin. When we stepped onto the deck, the cargo ship was already swaying and starting to sink. The barbarian simply gave up rowing. Instead, he grabbed the small boat next to him and swung it out with all his strength. Then he jumped up, stepped hard on the boat, jumped directly to the edge of the cliff, and flew towards the top of the mountain. The moment they stepped onto the top of the mountain, a bright light bomb rose from the direction of the Lord of Glory's fleet, illuminating the surrounding areas. They found it. Run! Several people shouted at the same time. The red-robed Bishop Hawk of the Lord of Glory Church was extremely angry. While others lead the main fleet, he leads the squadron. Others sailed dozens of miles easily, but he crossed the rough seas, fearing and tossing hundreds of miles. Others went straight to the opposite capital, and his opponent was a local count. The palace coup on other people's side has been completed. He can just go there and accept the results. He still needs to calculate the time and ride the tide into the depths of the river, then march for hundreds of miles, go around to the rear of the other people's team and launch a decisive blow. Such a gap, even if he performed his most beloved activity that day, the execution of heretics, could not make him feel any better. To make matters worse, in the middle of the night, when I was sleeping comfortably, I was woken up by a loud noise. Hawk was awakened by a huge roar, his heart beating rapidly. He reached out and touched the water glass on the bedside. He took a sip and it turned out to be cold. He dropped the glass violently. What happened? No. Not here, it's somewhere far away. Check. The red-robed bishop gave the order, and a group of black knights immediately climbed up the cliff and followed the sound. This team of knights belongs to the Inquisition and is not good at frontal combat. However, it is specialized in performing searches, arrests, interrogations and other tasks. A team of 10 people, led by a level 9 knight, ran wildly upstream for a short time when they saw torn sails and splinters of wood floating down the current. Upstream, shouted a sharp-eyed young attendant. The knight captain turned back and glared at him. Wilbo, what does Chapter 7, Section 15 of the Holy Code say? The young attendant's cheeks immediately turned pale. He lowered his head, but he didn't dare not answer, or even answer slowly. God said, if you see strange things, don't be alarmed. Because I am with you and I am protecting you. You must be quiet and calm, comfort my lambs, and convey my grace to them. Confess to Father Richard when you go back, the captain said coldly and continued to chase. They followed the clues and turned around a bend in the mountain wall, just in time to see the cargo ship in front of them slowly sinking, with the last bit of the mast tip remaining. The ship sank, the captain concluded while standing on the top of the cliff. He then glanced at his subordinates. What are you doing? Myron, go back and report to Mr. Hawk that a ship sank upstream. We are still investigating the details. Lynch, go into the water and see how deep the water is in this section and whether the channel will be blocked. Pine, Nick, you two go down the cliff to search to see if it is man-made and if there are any masters inside. Myron, Gordon, Fitch, search forward. He gave orders methodically. Soon, messages one after another were gathered in front of the captain. Footprints found at the bottom of the cliff. I found traces of rope climbing. This kind of mountain wall needs to be climbed with ropes. There must be someone in the team who is not above level 5. The planks on the bottom of the ship are largely broken. It's not scuttled. There's not much oil on the water, so it's not burning with oil. What sank the ship was either alchemy equipment or magic. There are mages in the team. There are no dead people in the water. The boat was deliberately brought here to sink, blocking our road. There are more and more clues, and the situation is becoming more and more obvious. The captain did not wait for all his subordinates to return before issuing the second order. Chase. Follow the ridge and chase forward as quickly as possible. Notify the back that there are heretics maliciously sinking ships and blocking the Holy Fleet. We are searching for the enemy's location and need magic help. News from the Inquisition night team reached the red-robed bishop one by one. Bishop Hawk could keep his expression unchanged at first, sitting at the walnut desk and drinking tea slowly. The wide sleeves drooped straight, and the golden thread on the sleeves reflected the candlelight without any ripples. However, when he heard that big ships can't pass, and it will take at least 3 days to clear the channel, he finally succeeded and threw the teacup again. Damnable heretics. Let them step up the search. Who is leading the team? Benjamin. Give him the order to capture those heretics. Burning. Burning. Well, they need to show the enemy's traces. Go and ask Yamaster SA, ask him to activate the Great Light technique. The Knights of the Lord of Glory were searching for traces of the enemy, and the task force that had successfully sunk the cargo ship was still running wildly. Bernard didn't let Greet get off the ground at all, he just carried him and continued running forward. Master Daniel cast a floating spell on himself, jumped forward, grabbed the edge of the steel shield, and hung it beside him like a kite. The group of people didn't even dare to light torches. They rushed to the foot of the mountain and fled eastward along the mountain wall. This had been discussed long ago, heading south was the direction back to the main camp. It was a flat plain for hundreds of miles. If caught by the opponent, it would be a dead end. The only way is to go east and use the cover of the mountains, maybe the other party won't be able to find them. He rushed out 2 or 3 miles in one breath. Just when the mountain wall began to twist and they were about to hide in a depression, a white light suddenly appeared behind them. Greet looked back in horror. Far, far away, a man in white robes flew into the air, holding a spherical magic object in his hands, and thousands of rays of light shot out. The man lowered his head, looked down, and prayed. His voice seemed quiet, but it reached Gretel's ears calmly. My lord, you are the origin of all things, you are the creator of the world, and you are the only holiness. My lord is the greatest, my lord is the highest. Your eyes see everything, and all evil has no escape. After a long prayer ended, the ball suddenly became brilliant and shone for miles. The dazzling white light illuminated Gretel's side as if it were daytime. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 142. As soon as the prayers came into his ears, the hairs all over Gretel's body started to tremble. Who is that? Who is that person flying in mid-air? High-level spellcaster? High priest? Even teachers can't fly. That person can fly into the sky and his voice of prayer spreads for miles. How powerful is that person? Grade 10? Level 11? Or higher? Or, what kind of magic item was used to help? If that person comes to hunt them down. Bernard, do you know what level he is? Gretel asked in a low voice. Even though they were far apart, he was still afraid that the other party would hear the noise, so he subconsciously lowered his voice. Bernard shook his head angrily. I don't know. I won't know until I fight. Beaten. It's too late to fight? Gretel touched his pocket and then the mana pearl around his neck. He still didn't feel safe at all. God bless, Buddha bless, God of nature bless, the other party must not discover them. Whatever you are afraid of will happen. At the end of the prayer, the ball in the man's hand suddenly shone brightly, illuminating the area 10 miles away as bright as day. Gretel and his group were originally hiding in the darkness, but when illuminated by this white light, they were completely unable to hide. In the east, the voice of prayer sounded again, with the same gentle and clear voice, but the words it said made Gretel's hair stand on end. The cunning heretic, the enemy of the Holy Fleet, is clinging to the mountain wall and escaping eastward. The white light on the sphere changed from scattering to condensation, and a dazzling light pillar firmly covered Gretel and others. The spot of light that fell on the ground was the size of a house, and the chasing team could see the direction of the enemy at a glance even if it was more than 10 miles away. Gretel's whole body was cold. He reflexively shouted, "Go to the right. Run against the mountain wall. If we turn inward on the mountain wall, we will be safe." It's hard to believe that such a powerful magic can be moved at will. If that ball of light could keep floating outwards and keep the beam of light over our heads, I would admit it. Greed thought viciously. The team had already turned around without him reminding them, sticking to the foot of the mountain and trying their best to escape eastward. While running, there was a sudden scream, and the 5th level shield warrior rolled heavily to the ground, including his body and his horse. "York!" exclaimed Captain Barnes. The shield warrior rolled a few times, got up with difficulty, and immediately looked at the mount. Only one glance and he said sadly, "Captain, the horse is dying." These mounts were in bad luck tonight. There was no food to eat, no rest to rest. I was tossing forward for dozens of miles in the middle of the night, and then running back for dozens of miles in vain. That's not all. After finally resting for a short while, I had to hunch over my master again. He ran back desperately. Even the donkeys in the production team dare not build it like this. The shield warrior York is the bulliest, has the heaviest equipment, and carries the greatest burden on his mount, so he is the first to collapse. As soon as his horse fell, the horses in the team neighed, and several more horses staggered. To make matters worse, the sound of horse hooves was as dense as a rain shower, and the pursuers were already catching up from behind. "No way, Captain," York gritted his teeth and stood up, carrying the steel shield. He raised his head and looked at the white light that continued to shine in the distance, with a pale expression on his face. "Captain, I'll cut off the queen, you guys run away. Don't stop here," Gretel blurted out together with Daniel the mage. The two looked at each other, and Greet continued to shout. "Keep running forward. Go to a place where white light cannot reach, we will set up an ambush and kill the pursuers." The team continued to run hard. Shield warrior York was only temporarily discouraged, but was awakened by a word and cheered up. The physical strength of the 5th level knight is already strong. When he runs, his speed is no slower than anyone else. However, Greet's mount was also a little weak, so the barbarian Bernard simply jumped off the horse and carried Greet over. Greet lay on the barbarian's back, trying to turn his head and look behind him. After taking a quick glance and confirming the composition of the pursuers, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank God, there's no big guy who can fly. As for the others, well. How many people are behind you? Are they knights?" Captain Barnes shouted as he ran. Gretel tried to stretch his neck. 10 people. I don't know if they are knights. They are all wearing black armor and holding big swords. They all have golden thunder patterns on their clothes, and there is a very strange. He racked his brain to think of how to describe it. Master Daniel had already looked back, and at that glance, his whole body was shaken. "The dogs of the Inquisition. Run!" everyone said in unison. Gretel began to look through his pockets. Before coming out, any of the magic items Lin gave him could make a comeback. Which attack has far enough range? A cold and heat resistant ring, waste. The ring of water purification technique, is useless. Bright amulet, this can only be used for defense, not attack. The control the undead pendant, there are no dead people at the moment, and even if there were, I wouldn't have time to deal with it. The ring of corpse explosion technique, this is great. Go back and find an opportunity to blow them up. Fortunately, the mountain finally began to turn inward, and the ball hanging in the air did not move. Horse hooves burst into the darkness, and Gretel finally breathed a sigh of relief. This was the first time he truly felt that the shelter of darkness could be so kind. God bless, those people behind me, please slow down too. He looked around, trying to find favorable terrain and preparing to set up an ambush. Well, the mountain road ahead is quite narrow, and you can probably pull a few snagging ropes. There is a bend further ahead. I have to dig a few holes behind the bend. I don't know if it's too late. Hey, it would be nice if there was a cliff, I could trick people directly. Gretel was picking and choosing, constantly thinking about it, but no terrain satisfied him. Before he could make up his mind, a neat roar sounded from the pursuers behind him. For the glory of the Lord of Radiance. Amidst the roar, the black-armored knights took off their swords and pointed forward in unison. Gretel just turned around to look, and saw the front ends of the knights' swords emitting bright white light at the same time, illuminating the entire mountain. COL. $%. Gretel swallowed a loud curse and closed his eyes urgently, tears streaming down his face. Why does this have its own lighting? With the light, many tricks to deceive people will no longer work. Fortunately, Bernard was running with him on his back. If he had run by himself, he would have been stabbed in the eye and would not have fallen down on the spot. However, the means of chasing soldiers are not limited to lighting. Gretel was jolting violently on the barbarian's back, and suddenly heard a string sound. Immediately afterwards, Bernard jumped forward and almost fell to the ground. Arrows flew past, and the double-sword warrior beside Captain Barnes screamed, heartbreakingly. They have strong bows. They have strong bows. Don't shoot him, someone behind him shouted to stop him. Gretel just breathed a sigh of relief when the somewhat feminine voice continued. That pagan priest in front. That magician. Stop. The Lord of Glory is a tolerant God and a kind God. As long as you are willing to convert, I, Gordon Maneva, will protect you in the name of the Inquisition. Immortal. I believe you, you big-headed ghost. Greet resisted the urge to turn around and curse, and tightly grasped the corpse explosion ring. He poked Bernard, motioned the barbarian to carry him to the captain, and whispered. As soon as you pass the curve ahead, kill 2 horses. Block them in front. Yes, Gretel raised his fist and showed the ring in his hand to the captain. The necromancer gave it to me. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please recommend, why the recommendation votes plummeted today. Please subscribe, please give me a monthly ticket, please review the book. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 143. Gordon Maneva was very excited. He led an elite team from the Inquisition, a team of 10 people, 5 knights, 2 of whom were level 6. As for himself, even a 9th level knight. Although there were 20 people on the other side, according to his observation, there were only 3 who reached the level of knights. Among the 3, the strongest barbarian is only level 7. What's more important is that there is actually a spellcaster among that team of heretics. 2. Credit. Credit for delivering it to your door. The Inquisition places special emphasis on spellcasters among the heretics. If both of them can be captured alive, whether it is forcing them to convert or tying them to the stake, the merit will be enough to exchange for a promotion ceremony and let the Inquisition help him advance to the 10th level. Level 9 to level 10 is a natural chasm. Step over it and he can become a great knight. By then, neither his fighting ability nor his status in the church will be the same as it is now. The more Knight Gordon thought about it, the more he became excited. He urged the team to speed up and get closer and closer. Seeing that the huge achievement was about to be achieved, the infidels who were fleeing in front turned around and disappeared behind the corner of the mountain road. Myron. Fitch. Speed up. Gordon shouted to urge the subordinates in front. The situation ahead is unclear. If they don't hold on tightly, God knows where they can run. If one of those heretics, especially the two spellcasters, escapes, his achievements and promotion ceremony will be over. Myron, who was running at the front, suddenly reined in his horse and stopped his mount. Fitch was caught off guard and quickly reined in his horse, almost hitting him. The two horses kept neighing and circling in circles. If the mountain road had not been for a cliff on one side and a gentle slope on the other, the two knights would have thrown themselves and their horses down on the spot. "What are you stopping for?" Gordon was furious. However, after hearing his accusation, the knight at the front not only did not continue on his way, but jumped off his horse and walked forward. "Captain, the front is blocked." "Then move away. You all get up there." Gordon answered without thinking. He gave an order, and Myron, Fitch, and the two knight attendants running in front stepped forward to clear the road. Knight Myron casually hung the sword back on the saddle and muttered, "You can block the road by killing these horses? What are you thinking? It seems like no one can drag them. Horse corpse? Horse corpse." Gordon stood behind and his whole body shivered, and 36,000 cold hairs exploded. At this moment, intuition took over the whole body instead of reason, and the knight captain shouted, "Back off! Back off! Get out!" Boom! There was a loud bang. The horse corpses piled up at the corner of the bend, dragged out, and held in the hands of the knights, exploded at the same time. Dead branches and leaves fell all around, and gravel rolled down from the cliff, causing the entire ground to tremble. Gordon, who was about 10 meters away, could not escape the impact. A powerful wave of air rushed towards his face, pushing him upward. Stumped limbs, flesh and blood, and strange liquids exploded and flew in all directions. Gordon reflexively raised his buckler to cover his face, blocking the blood rain from the sky. But his subordinates were not so lucky. Especially Myron and Fitch at the front. The two knights shouted in unison and screamed with all their strength. "Ah! Eyes, my eyes! My face! Corpse explosion? How could it be a corpse explosion?" Knight Gordon felt his head buzzing. The other party clearly has only two spellcasters, one of whom holds an oak staff and is a servant of the god of nature, the other, judging from his dress and the traces of spellcasting left before, should be an elemental mage, at least not a necromancer. Is there a third caster? Could it be that he made a mistake in his judgment that there was a necromancer in that team? Attention everyone! There is also a necromancer. He shouted a warning to his subordinates. They went forward to check and found that Myron and Fitch were not seriously injured, but their eyes were injured by the exploding corpse pulp, which was very difficult. Gordon's strength lies in combat, but his level of healing skills is not high enough to handle such injuries. As for the other two knight squires, unfortunately, there is no need for rescue. From this, it can be seen that the corpse explosion ring that Master Lin gave to Gretel is definitely of excellent quality without any compromise. There was nothing the Gordon Knight could do about his subordinates' injuries. He could only clean the two wounded men briefly and help them onto their horses. He told his attendant, Wilbur, who was scolded by him in the first place. Take them back and take good care of them. Only 4 were killed? Greet looked back on the barbarians back with some regret. After all, the corpse explosion technique failed to turn the situation around. Not long after, the Knights of the Inquisition were furious and caught up with them again. As for Greet's team, the horses fell down one by one, and the soldiers who lost their horses ran away in confusion. Finally, Blake, the youngest and lowest-ranking soldier, rolled to the side of the road, holding his ankles and unable to stand up. "Captain," the young man's voice was filled with tears, and he struggled hard to shake off Captain Barnes' grasping hand. "Leave me alone." "Run, run quickly." "Twisted ankle? Achilles tendon rupture? Fracture?" Greet reflexively wanted to heal him, but Bernard carried him in his hand and ran forward blindly, unable to get off the ground at all. The situation was urgent, and the pursuers had bows and arrows. The barbarians no longer even carried him on their backs, but carried him in front of them and covered him tightly with their broad backs. Greet couldn't escape him, so he had to take out a tube of potion and throw it with all his strength. "Healing potion. Go on." The young man who fell down immediately disappeared from sight. Soon, Captain Barnes caught up with him, his eyes red, and he ran wildly. After a while, a scream came from far away on the mountain road behind. "We can't go on like this." Captain Barnes suddenly made up his mind. He stood firm, took off the strong bow from his shoulder, and touched it lovingly. "Let's stop. Fight with them." "Fight," Shield Warrior York was the first to respond. He wanted to do this the moment he fell off the horse, but was stopped by the captain and has been restrained until now. Upon hearing Captain Barnes's call, he immediately turned around and placed a steel shield as high as half a man on the ground. "I'm in front. Barnes, you get behind me, get on top." The soldiers completed their formation in silence. They killed the remaining 5 war horses and piled them at the bend of the mountain road to make a bunker. York was in front, and 2 low-level shield warriors, one on the left and one on the right, erected shields behind the horse corpse. Captain Barnes and another archer climbed up to the high ground, and the other warriors held spears and knives, forming a small killing array behind the shield warrior. Only Master Daniel was not included. The young magician stood aside, looking at his friends who lived and died with him, his face flushed. I'm almost running out of magic, give me a knife." There will be another chapter in 5 minutes. Thanks to @Sanji Yukin for the 500 starting coin reward. Thanks to @Lofsway for the 200 starting coins. The number of follow-up and recommendation votes has dropped a lot recently. Doesn't everyone like to watch battles? Then I will write this paragraph quickly. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 144. Daniel was indeed running out of magic. Not only did it run out, but I ran all night and didn't have time to recover from sleep. At this time, the mage was basically useless. Probably with this in mind, the guys from the Inquisition kept chasing him and wouldn't let go. After all, a 4th level mage with complete spell slots is completely different from a 4th level mage who has exhausted his spells. A level 1 warrior might be able to chop the latter to death, but for the former, even if several knights charged in formation, they might not be able to take it down. "Go quickly." Captain Barnes didn't hesitate and pushed Daniel directly. He turned to Greet again, hesitantly. According to convention, when nothing can be done, the spellcasters in the team have the right to evacuate first. Gretel should leave too, but that barbarian, I wonder if he can join the formation. The barbarian is the most powerful one in the team. If he joins, the team's strength can be greatly improved, and more people can survive. However, according to convention, followers are only responsible for the objects they protect. If Gretel wants to evacuate, the barbarians have no reason to stay. Captain Barnes hesitated, unable to make up his mind. Gretel has turned to Master Daniel. That's right, go quickly. Cast the phantom sound spell as you go, pretending that we are still running away, so that we can catch him off guard. Master Daniel gritted his teeth and turned the horse's head. The heavy sound of horse hooves and running, like the sound of more than a dozen people rushing together, spread far away. On the other side, Greed had already opened his pocket and gave everyone the healing potion. Take it. I may not be able to take care of you later, so remember to drink it yourself. Gretel, let's go too. Captain Barnes finally made up his mind. The little priest shouldn't die here. He was willing to give them healing potions in times of crisis, and he was willing to take great risks to work for the glorious God. Such a good little priest shouldn't die here. The Inquisition's pursuit team is very strong. Even if the barbarian is allowed to take the little priest away, there will only be a glimmer of hope, but if he is left here, there may not even be a glimmer of hope. Let's go. Let Bernard take you away. Captain Barnes shouted. Gretel, however, took 2 steps back and looked at the barbarian with a pleading look on his face. Bernard, can you go up with them? The warriors of the north will not abandon their companions, Bernard shouted back, picked up the bone club, and strode forward. He is tall and has long legs, and he can take 2 steps with 1 step. He squeezed into the group casually and stood side by side with the 2 shield warriors. The barbarian bowed slightly, holding the bone club in both hands and pointing diagonally forward, and suddenly turned back to look at Greed. You're fine. Bernard will always follow you. Good. Greed nodded heavily. He pulled out the stopper and drank a bottle of energy potion. Feeling the cold excitement rising in his mind, he held a tube of oxygen tightly and stepped into the queue. I still have magic. It's the one you saw, I'm with you. What's the range? Captain Barnes suddenly turned his head. Greet didn't even think about it, 30 feet. Get behind Bernard. Bernard, protect the little priest. The horse's hooves are like thunder, and the pursuers are coming. Gretel felt his heart shaking with the ground. Ta-ta-ta-ta, tap-ta-ta-ta. This is not good, he thought, trying to calm his breathing. Don't let the beating of your heart bring out the galloping rhythm of the cavalry on the opposite side. If I go back and check it out, I will find out that the galloping rhythm was caused by being frightened and that my heart muscle was not seriously damaged or even suffering from heart failure. I will make the emergency department laugh to death. Even the guys outside his heart could squeeze in and laugh at him. Gretel was thinking erratically, and his breathing became more and more rapid. On the other side of the corner, the knights of the tribunal slowed down their horses slightly and adjusted their rhythm. The sound of horses' hooves gradually became uniform, and the knights' prayers became louder and louder. My Lord, you are holy in heaven. My Lord, you are the law of the earth. May your light shine on earth as it does in heaven. And we will become your sharpest blade. Dazzling, bright white light gradually lit up from the other side of the bend, illuminating the mountain wall. Then the cold longsword picked up the horse corpse, slashing horizontally and vertically. The heavy horse corpse split into 4 pieces and rolled towards Greed. Do it! Captain Barnes shouted. York raised his shield, and 2 shield warriors raised their shields beside him at the same time. Bernard roared, raised his bone club, and thrust it upward with force. At the same moment, the horse on the opposite side neighed, and a big sword with a white light spread like wings slashed down heavily. Boom! The earth trembled. Greed stood behind Bernard, 5 steps away, but still felt as if a bomb had exploded under his feet, shaking him back and forth. In front of him, the barbarian's tall body bent, his leggings and belt collapsed at the same time, and blood spurted out from the mouth of his hands. The shield warriors on the left and right, led by the York Knight, staggered and fell backward. "Come again," Bernard raised his head and roared, his eyes turned red for a moment, and his muscles stood up one by one. He tore off the animal skin on his shoulders with a single stroke, holding the bone club in both hands, and stepped forward. The knight on the opposite side jumped off his horse, also holding a sword in both hands, and charged forward. "Come again. The light shines brightly." Greet saw in a trance that a ray of light rose from the barbarian's bone club, raising his head and roaring, like some ancient giant beast, and on the opposite side, the phantom of an angel appeared above the head of the knight, the Lord of Glory, which was exactly the same as the knight, swinging down the long sword. The loud noise broke out again. The knight's sword hit the bone club. The light and shadow of the giant beast disappeared in a flash, and Bernard spurted blood all over his body, flew backwards, and hit the mountain wall hard. On the huge bone rod, branch-like cracks crackled and spread to the middle of the bone rod. In the aftermath, the surrounding shield warriors fell to the ground radially, with shields covering their bodies in a mess. Even Greet was knocked to the ground on the spot and rolled several times. In the horrified eyes of everyone, the knight who was fighting the barbarian stumbled to his feet and raised his sword forward. "Surrender!" The man ignored the mess on the ground and moved forward steadily. He pulled down his mask, and pointed his cold sword at Gretel with his cold eyes. "Little priest, you can't escape. Surrender now and swear to convert to the Lord of Glory. In the name of the Inquisition, I, Gordon Minerva, will protect you from death." Gordon moved forward step by step. Bernard tried to struggle to get up and held on the mountain wall for a while, but immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. Captain Barnes above fired his arrows with all his strength, and several arrows flew out in succession, but the opponent paid no attention to him and waved them away like a tree branch. "Your follower is only level 7, right? I am a level 9 knight. With the blessing of divine magic, I can reach the peak of level 9. Surrender and convert, and your follower does not have to die in vain. Gordon's voice was calm and he walked forward slowly. "There is only one green leaf on the little priest's robe, and there is only one green leaf floating on the top of the oak staff in his hand. A priest who is only a first-level priest can't do anything, and he can hit him 10 or 8 times with just one hand. Don't hurt him, cough, 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 don't hurt him. The barbarian roared, struggled, and managed to get up with the bone stick. Standing up, vomiting blood, falling, vomiting blood again, getting up again, Gordon glanced indifferently and turned his head leisurely. Then, he saw the little priest crawling up from the ground, putting his left hand into his pocket, pushing his right palm forward flatly, and making a gesture that was both familiar and unfamiliar to him. #UN@%. A torrent of blazing white flames rushed toward his face. The number of follow-up and recommendation votes has dropped a lot recently. Doesn't everyone like to watch battles? Then I will write this paragraph quickly. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendations, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 145. Pure white flames spurted forward. 10-meter range, 60-degree cone. Centered on Greet's outstretched right palm. From eruption to arrival, it only took a moment, or even less than a second. In front of it, Knight Gordon, who was slowly approaching, was sprayed in the face with blazing high-temperature flames without any reaction. Gordon didn't even think about being on guard. A little priest, a level 1 priest of the god of nature, is a complete joke in front of a level 9 knight. In order to make the opponent surrender, he could simply stand and let the opponent fight without counterattack. Then, flames rushed towards his face. Extremely bright. Extremely dark. Knight Gordon lost his vision in an instant. He didn't see the little priest opposite him roll to the ground, he didn't see the enemy draw his bow and shoot an arrow forward, he didn't even see an arrow shoot past him towards his companions. He couldn't see or even feel anything. From Gretel's perspective, he saw the knight opposite standing frozen in the white fire, his facial skin, muscles, and facial features disappearing in an instant. There were even several black holes on the surface of the skull, the locations of which were unusually familiar. Bright sparks exploded on the visor, helmet, and front armor, but even the metal burned. This man is dead. Gretel thought. He lay on the ground and rolled away. His left hand reached into his waist bag and held the second tube of oxygen. The enemy was sprayed from the front by high-temperature flames, causing third-degree burns on his entire face. The entire layer of his skin was burned, and the injuries reached deep into the muscles and even bones, and the surface was carbonized. The eyes, ears, and nose are all destroyed in an instant. Even if the brain is not carbonized, cerebral edema will quickly occur and cause shock. By the way, looking at the way that guy's armor is burning, his throat, trachea, common carotid artery, etc. may also be carbonized. Death from lack of oxygen takes only a matter of minutes. This is the first person I've ever killed. Greet thought silently. His whole body was cold, and he had a strange sense of alienation. He seemed to have risen to a very high place and looked down, and he seemed to be looking at everything in front of him through the screen. The dead and injured are just NPCs in the game. Yet it's true. In my previous life and this life, this was the first person I killed with my own hands and watched him die with my own eyes, with the malicious intention of taking his life. Different from the injured and sick in the previous life, those who were too late to save or could not be saved and watched them die, those who he personally extubated, stopped rescuing, and declared dead. It's even different from the few people who retreated under the corpse explosion technique just now and don't know whether they are alive or dead. This is the first person that I, Wujo, Gretel Nordmark, have personally killed in my past life. However, I have no regrets. Greet thought silently. Use the knowledge from the past life and the learning in this life to integrate it and improve your combat power. This ability can even be used to kill people. I have no regrets. They hurt innocent people, killed my comrades, and injured my important companions. These people deserve to die. There was silence on the mountain road. The Inquisition knight slashing with his sword, the Inquisition knight attendant urging his horse forward, the task force soldier who rolled to the ground and tried to resist with his shield, the barbarian Bernard who struggled to pounce. The moment the white fire spurted out, everyone froze in their movements, dumbfounded. They watched as Knight Gordon, the leader of the pursuit team and the strongest man on the scene, was caught in the white fire and stood frozen on the ground. Burning, hair, cloak, and even armor are burning, and Knight Gordon stands there like a statue, motionless. Ah! I don't know who broke out the first scream. Gretel stood up, took a step forward, and pushed out his palm again. The blazing white fire rolled out again. This time, another knight attendant who could not dodge was hit by the flames, and his body and horse burned fiercely. In a moment, the horse's legs were carbonized and broken. The man and the horse fell down together, leaving a mess of black ash on the ground. From the beginning to the end, not even a single scream was made, including the man and the horse. However, no one noticed this anymore. The moment the second burst of white fire erupted, the chasing knights of the Inquisition turned around and ran away one by one. When Knight Gordon fell, all the pursuers of the Inquisition had run away, and not even his back could be seen. Bernard made a grunt, his legs weakened, and he fell to the ground. Gretel didn't have the time to make her legs weak. He rushed forward, looked at Bernard first, alive and not in danger, turned around and ran away. Task Force number 20, there were 15 or 6 people lying down, all waiting for him to rescue them. The soldiers underground have raised their heads one after another. Shield warrior York half supported his body with one elbow, and raised his other hand hard, spreading his fingers, holding the healing potion in his hand. Cough, cough, I'm fine, go use it. I didn't use it just now. You lie down. Gretel sneered at him. The confrontation just now was fierce, but it was also short-lived. Several shield warriors in the front row were knocked to the ground, and their injuries were not serious. On the other hand, among the warriors behind who went up to fight with knives and swords, one had his arm broken, one had his leg trampled by a horse, and one was stabbed in the chest and abdomen. Gretel was so busy that he flew into the sky and kept calling people. Bring me my backpack. Captain. Wrap him up here first and tighten it with a stick. I'll take care of it later. Water. Give me clean water. Hold both sides tightly, pull out. Pull. Gretel was sweating profusely. He used emergency exploration, surgery, and treatment techniques at the same time. He wished he could even use his toes. I was busy until the sun rose over the top of the mountain, and I finally took care of the wounded. Then I turned back to look at Bernard. The barbarian had already taken a breath and was sitting on the ground munching horse meat. There was another row of horse meat roasting on the fire, but it was the dead horse that Gretel killed on the spot, and the back half was not charred. The stalker had a bandage on one arm, and held his meager dagger in the other hand, swishing, swishing, and slicing pieces of horse meat quickly. Bernard, how are you? Gretel walked over slowly, holding onto his almost broken waist. The barbarian raised his head from the horse meat, and half of his face, from the tip of his nose down, was a shiny mess. It's delicious, you can eat it too. A large piece of hot horse meat, dripping with grease, poked directly under Gretel's eyes. Gretel subconsciously jumped back, his legs softened, and he sat down on the ground with a plop. Gretel. Little Gretel. Your Excellency, Pastor. Of the 19 people present, 17 or 8 screamed in surprise. Captain Barnes and Bernard rushed to help him. One person pushed hard to one side and almost tore Gretel in half. Fortunately, the two people reacted and quickly let go, so it didn't turn into a joke of robbing the child in front of the judge. Gretel plopped back to the ground. He didn't even have the strength to protest, he only felt that his eyes were going dark and his whole body was weak. The exclamation rang out again, making him feel more dizzy and cold sweat breaking out. I'm fine, I'm hungry, give me a bottle of 10 candies. There was a moment of silence. There was no nurse to gently wipe his sweat. There is no familiar glucose water flowing into the mouth. Instead, it was a large piece of hard, tough stuff that couldn't even be chewed, and it was shoved into the mouth. Gretel subconsciously chewed it twice, and his teeth almost got stuck in it. What I want is glucose. Not maltose. I said you can't do it. At this time, Bernard, that barbarian, was still shouting like thunder in his ears. Why eat candy? What he needs is to eat meat. Eat meat. Thanks to @GodKillers Iaeazuojui for the 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendations, ask for book reviews. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 146. What? Metternich is dead? 4 of the pursuit team were killed and 2 were injured. Red-robed Bishop Hawk was shocked and angry. A thin face turned blue and white, white and blue again, and the pointed bald head was about to puff out. Hawk couldn't help but be shocked and angry. Although the army he leads has 10,000 people, it does not mean that he can use these 10,000 people at will. In fact, with just 10,000 people, there are already several forces, all mixed up and twisted into a ball. The Holy Knights of the Holy See, the Black Riders of the Inquisition, the armies of the Carolingian kingdom and the Rhine kingdom, the private armies of local lords along the way. Everyone has his own thoughts and his own background. The royal army always wants to preserve its strength. Among the local lords, there are always a few boys hanging around the radiant saint. The ascetics care nothing but the glory of God. From time to time, the Inquisition would arrest someone to kill. As the commander-in-chief of the army, he has to mobilize the army according to the strategy decided by the Holy See in advance, but he has to do some things that are not particularly public, such as arresting some heretics for execution, such as hunting down the group of heretics who sunk their ships and blocked the river, to save his face as the commander-in-chief. To him, Metternich's team was already a rare, sharp and very useful knife. Moreover, Gordon Metternich himself is still a level 9 knight, only one step away from being promoted to a Grand Knight. If he couldn't find this place, it would be like having someone slap him in the face. The majesty of the Lord of Glory cannot be desecrated. Paladins who dare to harm the Holy See must pay the price in blood. In just a moment, Hawk made up his mind, stood up majestically, and his red robe rolled. "Please come over, Master Taranto. Please come over, Lord Filmer. Please come over, Deputy Judge Lucerne." Master Taranto arrived first. He was the one who flew to pray last night. On a cold day, his feet were still bare. He was wearing a white burlap robe with no hems and a ring of thorns on his head. He lowered his head and twisted a string of wooden beads in his right hand, looking like he didn't care about anything. Only when he saw the charred corpse of Gordon Metternich did the rosary in his hand stop for a moment, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Pagan. Brother Metternich was massacred by heretics. Red-robed Bishop Hawk saluted respectfully. "Master, please tell me what kind of evil method he died under." Master Taranto looked down. Standing next to him with his head lowered was a knight squire who had escaped, muttering and recounting the tragic situation of the captain's murder. Master Taranto seemed oblivious, looking intently, even lowering his head and touching the edge of the twisted armor. Not long after, the armor was clanging, and the Grand Knight of Filmer and the Vice President of Lucerne came hand in hand. The Great Knight of Filmer entered the door and said immediately, "What else are you looking at? Isn't it just an evil magician? If you ask me, knights shouldn't pay attention to this." The army came ashore, and with one charge, many of them were trampled. "By the way, when will the channel be opened?" "I think we need to check," Lucerne's deputy referee retorted in a cold voice. His expression was dull, and his eyeballs moved a little slower than others. Just looking at it made people feel that the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. I asked about the team that came back, and there were servants of the evil god, people who disturbed death, and evil magicians. These are evil people who blasphemed the glory of our God. I suggest collecting intelligence on the other party and joining the wanted ones of the Inquisition. List. This is your duty. Red-robed Bishop Hawk lowered his head in agreement. The deputy referee of Lucerne nodded slightly, and the Knight of Filmer snorted coldly and turned his head. Master Taranto had been watching the corpse as if no one else was around, and suddenly said, "Dragon breath technique." "Dragon breath technique," the other three said at the same time. Master Taranto nodded affirmatively. "That's right. Brother Metternich is a level 9 knight with strong physical strength. Within 30 feet, a cone of flames burned him like this in an instant. It's only the dragon breath technique, it can't be anything else." Seeing everyone's surprise, answer, continue to explain. Dragon breath is a level 4 spell, which means that the opponent is a magician of level 7 or above. Doesn't that require dragon scales? The deputy referee suddenly interrupted. A flash of fire suddenly flashed through Zombie's eyes, as if a quiet corpse suddenly turned into a man-eating zombie. They got the dragon scales. The red-robed Bishop Hawk glanced at him quickly, then turned his head and pretended not to notice. Master Taranto really didn't see it, and said leisurely, Those evil people who have played with magic have a long history and often make deals with the devil. Some evil dragon scales are also normal. The evil magician must be purified, Bishop Hawk's red robe stated sternly. He looked around at the three people in the room and said proudly, "Masters, please send your fighting force to safeguard the dignity and glory of our God." "The light of my God should not only shine on one person," Master Taranto said calmly. He glanced at the charred corpses on the ground, crossed the threshold, and walked away. His bare feet stepped on the wooden deck, kicking and tapping, making a sound like dead wood hitting each other. "I'm going to supervise the training of the knights." Lord Filmer also said goodbye and left. "Just kidding, Metternich is not from the knights, why should he send someone here? The glory of the Knights Templar is on the battlefield, turning back to the shore, charging in formation, bulldozing the pagan army, and occupying their territory. That is what the knights should do. Let the tribunal do the hunting, trapping, arresting, seizing, etc." Hawk sent them away politely and looked at the Lucerne deputy referee expectantly. Sure enough, the senior executioner of the tribunal adjusted his cloak and said grimly, "It is the duty of the Inquisition to purify heretics. Brother Metternich was martyred for the glory of our Lord. His unfinished business will be taken over by the Inquisition's Black Knight." "Thank you, Chief Referee," Hawk said happily. He personally escorted Lucerne out. Halfway through, the deputy referee suddenly turned a corner and held down the golden compass on the shelf by the wall with one hand. Hawk instinctively felt a little hairy. The deputy referee looked at him steadily, his eyes not moving for a long time, and the figure of the red-robed bishop was reflected in his red pupils. The two of them were alone facing each other. Lucerne's voice became colder and colder, as if his vocal cords had been buried in the soil for 20 years and had not been dug out yet. "The exorcism compass. Give it to me, I will use it to detect evil waves and find those heretics. This is my personal thing." It was so easy to kill a magician and steal it. The red-robed bishop's heart twitched. However, facing the cold eyes of the deputy referee, thinking about the consequences of having a bad relationship with the opponent and losing face, he still pulled the corner of his mouth with difficulty. "I'll lend it to you for 3 days. It should be easy to find a magician above level 7. 3 days later, the army will land anyway. If you find it when you find it, you will find it. If you can't find it, the other party will definitely return to the team. No matter what the situation, the things can be recovered. 30 days. Is 3 days enough? 2 months. Okay, 30 days is 30 days, Ma Dan, this compass, I will use it to hunt down magicians after I get ashore. This is to meet and share half of it." Lucerne nodded silently, took the compass and left. He returned to his ship, ordered 20 teams of Black Knights from the Inquisition to go ashore to search for him. After arriving at the place where Gordon died, he activated the compass and looked intently. Level 7 mage, no. Level 6, no. Level 5, still not there. Level 4. This is 20 miles away. Cowardly devil. Chase me. The horse's hooves were like thunder, rolling away. Gretel and others huddled in the mountain. "Col, who are you chasing?" "Us. Are you following the wrong direction?" "Thanks to Et Corgis Sheriff for the reward of 1000 starting coins. Thanks to Etsun Alchemist for the 100 starting coins reward. Today is the first day of the college entrance examination. I wish all readers who are taking the college entrance examination good luck and do well in the plenary session. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 147. The referee's new round of pursuit, although looking in the wrong direction, still brought great trouble to Greet and the others. Without him, there are many people. Although the Lucerne deputy referee misjudged the opponent's strength, he was not stingy in manpower deployment. 20 teams of 200 people, riding light and fast horses, cast a wide net. Gretel and the others ran in the mountains for 2 days, sneaking to the edge of the mountain road several times, trying to find an opportunity to return to the main camp, but they saw the cavalry searching outside like a net. Block the perimeter of the mountainous area and block every exit. Circle and circle, tightening inwards. No, I can't get out. The stalker slid down the grassy slope and got into the hole. They are chasing us closer and closer, get up quickly and get back inside. The soldiers stood up in confusion. Pick up a spear, pick up a sword, pick up a shield, or like Gretel, be picked up by followers. Shield warrior York glanced anxiously outside the cave, and then cast expectant eyes on the captain. This won't work. We only have 1 day of dry food left. If we can't get out, we will be trapped and die here. We have to think of a way. Method. Captain Barnes frowned even more tightly than he did. In just 1 day, his red face and beard became messy, and a series of blisters appeared at the corners of his mouth. He looked hesitantly at the soldiers around him, then at Gretel, and then at the wounded soldiers. There is a way, but it's too risky. What can I do? Several voices asked at the same time. Captain Barnes frowned fiercely and relaxed decisively. Cross the river. They chose to cross the river in the middle of the night, when the moon was almost at its zenith. At this time, the high tide of the Dove River was almost over, and the low tide had not yet begun. It was unlikely that the fleet of the Lord of Radiance would move up the river. With the power of the rising tide counteracting the flow speed, they would not rush too far downstream. It was late winter and the river was cold. Gretel took off his clothes and stuffed them into his bag, then cast a bubble to wrap them up. Then, he took a deep breath and activated the cold-resistant and heat-resistant magic ring given by Lin En. Finally, he pounced forward and hugged a tree trunk. Bernard grabbed the other end of the tree trunk with both hands and shouted, "Hold tight." With a crash, people and trees were pushed into the water. The river water is a little cool, just like the coolness you feel when swimming in the water on a summer afternoon. Gretel knew that this was the effect of magical protection. Cold and heat resistance could keep him comfortable in extremely cold glaciers and deserts under the scorching sun. Almost immediately, a sound of gasps and teeth chattering sounded from behind, left and behind him. How cold must others be without magical protection? Can they hold on? Can those second-level warriors, those warriors who have just been injured and whose superficial skin has only healed, be able to hold on? Greet was secretly worried. There was a splashing sound around him, and Bernard pushed the tree trunk and rode hard to the other side. "Bernard, can you?" Greet asked in a low voice. The barbarian roared in a low voice, "The warriors on the glacier are not afraid of the cold. Don't make a sound." "Yes. Don't make a sound. Don't let the enemy find out." Gretel hugged the tree trunk tightly and let Bernard lead him forward. There are sparkling waves ahead, and the full moon is reflected on the Dove River in the middle of the night, and is broken again and again by the paddlers. In front of me and behind me, there were people paddling desperately without saying a word. Some movements were rapid, some were even in frequency, and some were getting slower and slower. Suddenly, a low, miserable voice rang quickly. "Captain, I can't do it anymore. Hold on. I'm here to save you. I can't do it, I have leg cramps. Captain, tell Lucia not to wait for me." The sound gradually faded away and disappeared. In the darkness, Greet couldn't see the man's face, nor did he know who he was. After just a few days of getting along, he couldn't identify each soldier just by listening to their voices. "Blame me," Greet thought sadly. "If I go further on the path of mage and have a higher level. Cold and heat resistant can make people not afraid of the cold, Floating saucer can create a horizontal saucer with a load of 100 pounds, touch of the sea can give people the ability to swim quickly, and activated rope can also make people swim drag it back. But I don't know any of these. At that time, I only selected a few magic spells that seemed to help with medical treatment and improve direct combat effectiveness, and then I rushed into the hospital. He lay on the tree trunk and pumped water hard to relieve Bernard's burden a little. The distance of a few hundred meters can be said to be short or long. As long as you are not afraid of the severe cold, the passing speed is not too slow. Not long after, Greet's feet trembled and he stepped onto the opposite river bank. The savage turned back to help his comrades. Gretel dragged his backpack and held an oak staff, which had just been unfastened from the tree trunk, and ran desperately along the mountain path. He finally found a recessed mountain wall and lit a bonfire at random. After a while, the soldiers of the task force climbed up the river bank one after another. Their faces were green and their lips were white from the cold, and they gathered around to warm themselves by the fire. Fortunately, there is a mage in the team. Yes, otherwise we wouldn't be able to light a fire in such a cold weather. Let's warm ourselves up by the fire, and then walk quickly. Old York stamped his feet vigorously in the outer circle. The knight's physical fitness is a step higher than that of ordinary warriors. The fighting spirit flows through his body, which temporarily dispels the cold. It's too close to the river bank here. Be careful if the enemy sees the fire. If you run out for a few dozen miles, there will be no pursuers, and you'll be safe. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly spoke loudly. On the other side of the Dove River, on the top of the high cliff, there was a sound like thunder. On the other side. They ran to the other side. Run! Bernard jumped up first, picked up Gretel and left. Gretel turned around and shouted. Put out the fire! Put out the fire! A group of people hurriedly ran into the darkness. In the rush, Gretel turned his head and glanced, only to see a warrior standing high on the top of the mountain, throwing his shield with all his strength. Another man leaped up, stepped on his shield, and instantly crossed half of the river. He is a master. Such a powerful master. Although he can't fly in the air, and he probably hasn't reached level 10 yet, with this skill, he can already catch up with the knight who seriously injured Bernard. Greet was horrified. With such masters chasing after them, the task force couldn't tell who would take care of whom or protect whom. They could only concentrate on running away. Whether they could escape or not only depended on their own lives. Escape all the way, fight all the way. The next morning, when the morning light was fading, Gretel was finally blocked at the top of the mountain. To the left and right, only Bernard the barbarian remained, and Captain Barnes had a broken arm. In front of them, a small group of black knights formed an array and approached step by step. 2 held shields, 2 held spears, and 1 held a heavy sword. On the helmets of the first 2 men, a row of golden stars shone brightly. 1 is level 8 and 4 are level 5. Others were shouting and running upwards, while others were struggling to cross the river on the other side. Little Greet, I'm sorry now that the matter was over. Captain Barnes looked at the river in the distance and smiled bitterly. If I had known this would happen, I should have let you go first when the river was blocked. How could you blow up the ship without me? Gretel raised his head and smiled. He put down his backpack, placed the oak staff at his feet, and held a tube of pure oxygen again. Let's fight first. I don't believe we can't kill these few. I still have 7 tubes of pure oxygen in my bag. And 10 tubes of potassium permanganate. There are 5 opponents in total. If you burn 1 to death, you will be counted as 1. Killing 3 will be enough to get the bonus. Killing 4 will earn you a profit. The worst thing is, I will travel through time again. Recommended, subscription growth is very small. Please subscribe, collect, recommend, book reviews. It will be finished soon, please don't keep the book T. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 148. Push flat with your palm, white fire spurts out. Fiery flames spurted out wantonly. Right in front of the flames, two black armored knights raised their shields and stepped on the ground at the same time. White light shone on the half-man high kite shields, and they actually rushed forward to face the flames. The defensive magic of the Holy Court of Glory is indeed unique. Gretel's improved version of the Burning Hand has a temperature of at least 1500 degrees, otherwise it would never be possible to ignite steel. However, the two shields were close to each other, and the white light on the shields flashed. Not only did it withstand the flames, it also extended to the sides, up and down. Behind the shield, the knight's face covered with visor and the iron boots stepping on the ground were not stained by the flames at all. Of course, after withstanding the blow, the white light on the shield flashed twice and then went out. However, the knight holding the shield was unscathed and continued to exert force with his feet, rushing within 5 meters of Gretel. Charge! Behind the shield warrior, the soldier holding a big sword shouted loudly. Dragon breath requires chanting time. The shield warrior kept charging. The two men behind them ran forward with spears in their hands. Captain Barnes used his remaining left arm to hold the sword tightly. Bernard held the bone club in both hands and bowed slightly. At this moment, Gretel's right palm moved forward and spurted out pure white flames again. Dragon breath technique. What dragon breath technique? I have burning hands. It's a mere first-level spell. With pure oxygen, I can almost cast burning hand instantly. Pure white flames swept across once again. But this time, the two shield warriors who were caught off guard only had time to raise their steel shields and block their faces. Ah! Two shrill screams. The kite shield, which was more than half the height of a man, covered his face but not his legs. Wherever the white fire passed, the greaves and iron boots burned instantly. Not to mention the two legs inside the iron armor. As soon as the white fire passed by, they were burnt black to the bone on the spot. The two shield warriors could still move forward entirely due to inertia. Bernard stepped forward, roared, and swept the bone stick in his hand from left to right like a whirlwind. With long screams, the two seriously injured shield warriors could not resist this strange force, and were swept far away from the cliff by him. Almost at the same moment, Gretel quickly followed him and launched the burning hand for the third time. Following the shield warrior, the souls of the two soldiers who attacked with spears emerged. One subconsciously rolled to the ground, and the other threw himself to the right, trying to avoid the cone-shaped fan of white fire. However, Gretel had been studying this magic for a long time. At this time, his palm was slightly pressed down, and the blazing white fire enveloped the soldier who was rolling to the ground. Further to the side, the flames flickered and swallowed up the second spear-wielding armored man. The last black knight holding a heavy sword turned pale and ran away. On the other side of the river, the golden compass of the Lucerne deputy referee suddenly lit up. It's nearby, he knelt on his knees and murmured a prayer. Soon, rays of light like snowflakes descended from the sky, and behind him and a group of knights around him, white wings condensed at the same time. On the other side of the river, Lucerne turned the compass twice in his hand, and a golden pointer on the disc was pointed straight at the top of the mountain opposite. The evil infidels are out there. This group of knights are all his confidants, and it takes more than a day or two to follow him. At this time, they are all in uniform, flying high on their light wings. They formed a formation, protecting the Lucerne deputy referee in the middle. They rose to a high altitude and looked up, then dived in the direction of Gretel. Here we go again. This time, there are more enemies coming and they are stronger. Gretel looked up at the swooping black-clad queue, feeling that his heart was about to stop beating. That group of people were flying. I heard Elder Irwin say that only powerful men above level 10 great magicians, archbishops, and heavenly knights have the ability to fly through the air. Even if they were flying with the help of magic items, with the level and number of these people, they would never be able to fight against them. Is that the end? Are you going to travel through time again? Greet quietly moved 2 steps, hid behind Bernard's back, and drank the last tube of energy potion. His face was cold, he gently adjusted his breathing, and reached out to hold the 4th tube of pure oxygen. Above the head, the knights in black armor were circling, and the shadows were getting bigger and heavier. "Surrender, evil infidel," the cry rumbled. Greet said nothing and raised his right hand, palm up. "The distance is too far. How far is 10 meters? Diagonally above, there is no reference object, so it is not easy to visually inspect, but it is definitely out of reach. Lower it down a little to give you a better look." Greet thought viciously. There was another command from above. "Land, team up. Pray." Half of the knights circled down and lined up 20 meters away from Gretel, with their spears, swords and shields covering each other. The other half of the knights were still flying in the sky, forming a queue and surrounding the deputy referee of Lucerne. Heaven and earth, pray with one voice. "My Lord, you are holy in heaven. My Lord, you are the creator of all things. My Lord, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." White light rippled in waves, condensing on the shield, condensing on the armor, and condensing on every knight. Then, the knights took their time and moved forward slowly. The test tube in Gretel's hand was almost full of water. He breathed rapidly, opened his fingers with his left hand, and clamped 3 test tubes at once. "Raise your right hand flatly and point forward. Count the other person's steps, count your own heartbeat, one after another. 10 steps to go, 9 steps, 8 steps, 7 steps, 4, 3. The opponent suddenly charged forward. The white fire in Greet's palm spurted out. 1 shot. Invalid. 2nd shot. The white light on the shield fluctuated slightly, but it was still ineffective. The 3rd shot. The 4th shot. The 5th shot. Gretel's eyes suddenly turned black. With his mental strength and full strength, he could only cast 5 first-level spells in a day. Moreover, these 5 shots have to be spaced out at intervals, so that they can be squeezed out almost instantly in one breath, and the whole person's energy is almost exhausted. But for the knights on the opposite side, only the white light was extinguished, and their shields and armor were unscathed. They were already rushing over, they were still 3 steps away from me, and Bernard's bone club was already raised. Number 6, send. The ring finger and little finger went deep into the pocket and grasped the mana pearl given by the old magician. Pearl light flashed and white fire roared. Greet sat down on his back. 3 steps away, the blazing white light already illuminated the horrified faces of the knights. God said, "Whoever worships me, I will protect him." Suddenly a prayer came from the sky. He spoke slowly, leisurely and calmly, but as soon as the first word was spoken, a flash of white light lit up the shield, just in time to resist the white flames of the burning hand. The knights continued their charge. Bernard roared, raised the bone stick high, and swung it down with all his strength despite the sound of the wind. Boom! A translucent round ball, turned upside down, just covered the 3 of Greet. The bone club sank deeply into the ball, and one by one the charging shield warriors hit the ball and bounced back. "Lucerne, you are going back to life as you live, and you actually bully a level 1 kid." Chapter 3 will be released with additional explosive updates, Chapter 2 will be additionally updated with follow-up reading, and Chapter 5 will be rewarded with extra updates, so it's all paid off. I'm exhausted. Go to sleep, zzzzzzz. Please subscribe, ask for recommendation votes, and ask for book reviews. Asking for a monthly ticket. Although I can't make it to the first page of the new book list, please let me stay on the second page for a few more days. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 149. Level 1 Little Guy. Is that me? Gretel raised his head, raised his head, raised his head hard, and couldn't even see even a little bit. He simply lay down on the ground, spread himself out completely, stretched out his limbs. Well, he felt comfortable. Saw it too. Behind his head, a magic airship, or shuttle, right? Was parked in the void. After all, this thing is quite small, and it is still thousands of miles away from the legendary Zeppelin. In any case, it was the first flying object Gretel had seen since traveling through time. Not far from the airship cabin door, 3 magicians stood gracefully. It seemed that they were their saviors. The leader stood in the void, his robes flying. The man on the left seemed to be stepping on something, and it was flickering. Gretel couldn't see clearly even when he squinted his eyes. As for the man on the right, he was sitting comfortably on a Pegasus, and the Pegasus was beating from time to time. A snort. Hey, Pegasus. Gretel's attention was immediately attracted. The Pegasus was the color of snow, and there was not a single speck of color on its soft fur. There was only a circle of rainbow light on its gently flickering wings. Standing quietly in mid-air, looking peaceful and gentle, especially easy to touch. Gretel's eyes were glued to his eyes. However, on the opposite side, the deputy referee of Lucerne was facing a formidable enemy. With a move from his hand, 5 warriors on the ground flew into the air and formed a formation around him again. Carlyle. Why are you here? Why can't I come? The magician standing in the void took a step forward. His movements were careless, as if there were transparent steps under his feet, allowing him to step up casually. In the morning light, a golden robe was fluttering in the wind, as if a small sun was hanging in the air. Taking a step further, Lucerne took 1 step back, took 2 steps forward, Lucerne took 2 steps back, and took a 3rd step. Lucerne turned around, and fled towards the east. The bright wings of light dragged out long tail flames, and soon they escaped and were no longer visible. The 3 magicians slowly fell to the ground. Greet got up from the ground, still a little dizzy, but thanks to the barbarian's help he was able to stand still. The leader, Master Carlyle, looked up and down at Gretel for a long time, his eyes getting brighter and brighter. It turns out it's really you. It's not the magic props, but the spell you cast. Not bad, interesting. What's your name? Greet Nordmark. Greet quickly announced his name. Master Carlyle said hey, raised his head, and narrowed his eyes slightly. This name is a bit familiar. Where have you heard it? Who is your teacher? I am studying in the Mage Tower hosted by Master Gearman in Heartland City. Greet could only answer like this. Carlyle looked up to the sky and thought for a moment. Gearman? I think I've heard of it. By the way, I remember, Lorenz's apprentice. Yes. Master Carlyle, thank you for your help. Gretel found some clues in his questions and bowed to express his thanks. Carlyle waved his hand. Hey, I'm not here to save you. The detection crystal saw abnormal fluctuations here. I came over to take a look, and there was someone shamelessly bullying a child. By the way, why are you here? A level 1 mage like you shouldn't go to the battlefield. Gretel smiled bitterly. He wanted to answer everything, but he was exhausted and extremely nervous and his brain was dizzy. Carlyle couldn't help but smile when he saw him swaying unsteadily. It's not convenient to talk here. Come on, get on the airship with me, and we'll talk slowly. Are those 2 of yours? Come together. There are still people in our team down there. Greet said anxiously. Master Carlyle said something. Balin, please take care of it. A knight next to him came out to salute. then turned around and went down. Greet looked after the knight's back, but was poked twice by Captain Barnes, so he could only keep up quickly. The airship shot through the sky. Everyone sat down and chatted, and then Gretel learned how he was saved. Master Carlyle is not a local reinforcement, but comes directly from the Magic Council. In the past few days, the Magic Council's airship has been circling in the distance, monitoring the movements of the Lord of Radiance's fleet. Early this morning, abnormal magic fluctuations were detected on the airship's monitoring screen, and strong magic reactions came one after another. Master Carlyle immediately made the decision and asked the airship to change its course and go around to take a look. Judging from the time, it was when he was blocked at the top of the mountain and killed 4 people with 3 consecutive shots of burning hand. From this point of view, he really saved himself. "So why did you come here?" Master Carlyle leaned against the porthole and asked again. "You are from Heartland City, shouldn't you be camped opposite?" Greet could only recount the experiences of the past few days. Master Carlyle clapped his hands and laughed. "I asked why the ship sank suddenly and made us wait for several days. It turned out to be your fault. But you were very brave and did a great job." Gretel slowly opened his mouth. After racking his brains, he spent the night blowing up ships and blocking the waterway, and then he was chased in the mountains for several days and almost died, but the Archmage of the Magic Council said, "We were kept waiting for several days. It turns out that even if he doesn't blow up the ship, is there someone watching this fleet?" Master Carlyle laughed but did not explain. The airship went down the river and slowly headed west. Not long after, Gretel saw the battlefield on the ground. With the Dove River as the boundary, on the east bank, the Norman Earls coalition forces have crossed half of the way and are fighting with the Midland County Army. On the west bank, half of the army has not crossed the river, and the fleet of the Lord of Glory has gone upstream. Abandon the boat and land on the shore, rush over and kill. Gretel was lying on the porthole, watching until his whole body became cold. They tried their best to blow up the boats and block the river, and then sent people to notify the main camp. This was what they were afraid of. The army that was halfway across the river was cut off by another new force. One wonders how much the morale of an army that was half-crossed would be shaken. In the army below, there are his comrades in arms, his colleagues, the soldiers he has personally treated these days, and the priests who study medical skills with him. Gretel dug at the porthole tightly, wanting to ask Master Carlyle to take action, but he understood that in the face of such a battle, his weight was too light. The airship did not approach the battlefield. It circled far away and turned north. Not long after, another army appeared on the distant horizon. The ranks were neatly organized and flags were waved. The 6-pointed star flag with a dark blue background is flying high, leading in front of each square formation. It is the army of the Magic Council. Do you see clearly? I have been waiting for several days and am preparing to take their retreat. Master Carlyle finally stood up. He walked towards the door of the boat, placed his palms on the door, and suddenly turned back and smiled. I remembered, you are the boy who developed the new use of magic detection. I also read your paper, the training plan of the Magic Council. Why don't you go? Follow me after this battle. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 150. With more than 10,000 soldiers, there are no borders. With more than 100,000 soldiers, the land is stretched to the sky. There were more than 40,000 to 50,000 people from the Magic Council, the Church of the Lord of Glory, the Norman Earls coalition forces, and the Midland County Army, strangled into 2 battle groups on both sides of the Dove River. Cavalry, infantry, catapults, archers, and crossbowmen, and spellcaster teams advanced and retreated to attack and defend, entangled endlessly. Sometimes you take a step forward, sometimes I take a step forward, and the dust and shouts of death roll up from the ground to the sky. Gretel looked down from the airship and thought he saw several giant dragons rolling on the ground, roaring and tearing, and their scales flying. When dragons fight in the wild, their blood is black and yellow. What did you see? Suddenly someone next to me asked a question. Gretel turned around and stood up quickly. The person who asked him the question was one of the 3 archmages who stepped out of the airship this morning, the one who stepped on the strange shiny thing. He did not dare to neglect and answered immediately. Our army has the upper hand. Oh. The Lord of Glory originally planned to take advantage of the unpreparedness of the coalition forces and take a bite from behind. If it were bitten by it, the coalition forces would be in chaos and the battle would be over. Gretel quickly glanced below. Although half of the coalition forces had crossed over, the layers of ditches, deer wood, and shield warriors had firmly withstood the surprise attack of the Lord of Glory. The black flag painted with lightning struck several times, but the fortress remained motionless, firmly blocking the church's coalition forces. Then, the Magic Council's army blocks their retreat. As long as both sides work together, they can win. If you don't count yourself as an extraordinary person, it's pretty much the same. The questioner nodded slightly. But do you know how many extraordinary beings above level 10 are there in this war? Earl Norman, level 12, the High Priest of the Spring Temple is level 11, Greet tried hard to search his memory, Elder Heath seems to be level 10, and the others, those who are taught by the Lord of Glory. Lucerne, who is chasing you today, is the Deputy Chief Referee of the Tribunal, level 13. The old magician replied leisurely. As he spoke, he stroked a little bird lovingly. The little bird pecked at his hand affectionately. Gretel looked carefully and saw that the back of the little bird did not seem to have feathers, but scales with metallic luster. The great knights of the knights should be on the same level as him. The cardinal leading the team will be 1 level higher. As usual, there will be a dervish to hold the line. Of course, our Carlyle here is also level 14, so he is not inferior to them. Greet nodded confusedly. Until now, he has never seen a master above level 10 attack with all his strength, and has no idea at all. The old magician glanced at him and didn't intend to explain more. He just pointed downwards. Here we go. The last syllable was still lingering in the room, and the airship suddenly jolted and sank heavily. Gretel was thrown upwards and almost hit the roof of the cabin. Bernard rushed over and grabbed him. 2 steps away, the oval hatch suddenly opened, blowing in the howling wind. Greet's breath suddenly froze as a cold wind blew in his face, causing him to close his eyes tightly. A gentle force pushed him into his seat. When Greet opened his eyes again, the old magician had already stepped out of the hatch and walked away. Why doesn't this airship have seat belts? Greet complained secretly, but he also knew that people who were qualified to ride in this airship probably didn't need seat belts at all. He rushed to the window and looked. Above the Church of the Lord of Glory in the distance, 3 people, one in white robe, one in red robe, and one in black robe, flew side by side, arranged in a zigzag pattern. The man in red robe is holding a big book in both hands, lowering his head slightly. The man in white robe on the left is holding a ball, and the man in black robe on the right is holding a sword tightly. The 3 of them were exactly the same, half kneeling in the air, and soft voices echoed layer by layer. My Lord, may your holy name be magnified. May your kingdom come. Please forgive us our sins as we forgive others. On the ground, the church army prayed in unison. The sound became louder and louder, as if it filled the whole space between heaven and earth, and the white light above and below also became one. The man in red raised his right hand high and pressed it down. The white light suddenly fell down and pressed towards the opposite military formation like a mountain. For the glory of the God of War. For the mercy of the goddess. For nature. 3 shouts were raised. A puff of water blue light, a black-red light that condensed the taste of iron and blood, and a cluster of vigorous green light each rose up, struggling to hold up. However, compared to the white light on the opposite side, the foundations of the three colored lights are intertwined and appear a bit scattered. It didn't last long before it was pressed down inch by inch. How is the teacher? How is the bald bishop doing? Greed pressed her forehead against the porthole and held her breath. In his panic, he didn't even realize that what the white light suppressed was not the coalition forces of the Norman earls, but the new Magic Council army that had joined the battlefield. The teacher, the bald bishop, and the comrades he cared about were not under the white light at all. The water blue light became lower and lower, and finally collapsed, and the iron blood light and green light were gradually suppressed to the bottom. At this moment, a thin tornado roared, rotated, and rose from the ground. The tornado broke through the water. The first time it rotated, it grew by 1 circle and 1/10 of the height. The second time it rotated, it grew by 1 circle. Gretel only took 3 or 5 breaths, and the tornado had grown to the same height as the ship's mast. At the same time, it sucked up an unknown amount of river water. Greet glanced at the river bank in his busy schedule, and saw that the water level of the Dove River dropped dramatically, revealing a wet river bank. Immediately afterwards, the river water rotated with the tornado and condensed into thin ice blades in the wind. Wind knives and ice swords cut around the fleet of the Lord of Glory Church at high speed, 1 circle, 2 circles. The whirlwind gradually added a heart-wrenching creaking sound. The deck was broken, the hull was damaged, and the mast fell. If the boat is gone, there is no way to go home. The church army was momentarily panicked. The holy knights in the center of the formation can still maintain their position, and the white light above the royal army and the local lord's army has begun to fluctuate slightly. With this movement, the emerald green light that was pressed to the ground suddenly raised its head like green grass sprouting. The 3 high-ranking priests who led the magic made a prompt decision. The man in white robe held the ball to his chest, and the man in black robe raised his sword high. The mountain-like white light suddenly condensed and took on the shape of a long sword, which fell forward as the man in black robe moved. The sky is torn apart. The long sword pointed at the sky, and a hole was pierced in the sky covered with dark clouds. The tip of the sword moved, and the dark clouds in the sky were cut to pieces. At the moment when the long sword fell, the lightsaber carried with it, already the prestige of the entire sky. And this sword, this bright lightsaber, was actually facing the airship, slashing towards Gretel's face. That look lit up Greet's eyes. He didn't have time to react, it was useless to do so. In his field of vision, a small black shadow shot out like an arrow, flying farther and farther, but growing bigger and bigger, becoming as big as a fist, as big as a basketball, and as big as a carriage. Big, big house. From Gretel's perspective, it was a bird, or something that looked like a bird. At least Gretel had never seen metal scales on the bird's back. The thing that looked like a bird spread its wings and rushed towards the lightsaber. It pecked it with its beak, flapped its wings, and tore it with its claws, fighting with all its strength. Amidst the sour sound, the lightsaber sank into the bird's body inch by inch, and was cut in half from the top of its head to its tail. There was a loud bang. The bird disintegrated in the air, and the steel sheets, springs, screws, exploded all over the sky, and the airship's shell received several blows. The nearest one hit the side of the porthole. If it was only 2 inches away, it would have smashed through the porthole, leaving Greet with a nasty hit. Even so, this alchemical bird has completed its mission. Above Gretel's head, that is, from the top of the airship, a piece of golden light flew out again, resisting the lightsaber that had shrunk by 70%. In the underground battle group, the 3-color brilliance of aqua blue, black red, and emerald green rose again, intertwined with the colorful magic light. The blessed Magic Council troops shouted in unison and pressed against the opposing military formation like an iron wall. The sun is gradually tilting. Greet looked down at the river through the porthole, and he didn't know whether the river was dyed red by the setting sun or by the blood of the dead or injured soldiers who fell into the river. Thanks to @bookfriend 2021030819044523 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for a monthly ticket, ask for book reviews. Please give me recommendation votes. Recommendation votes have dropped so much recently that I can't watch it anymore.